The orchestra stopped. The silence that followed was louder than a gunshot. 400 of New York's most dangerous elite froze their champagne flutes, suspended halfway to their lips. Every eye in the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was locked on the center of the floor. They weren't looking at Silas Vance, the ruthless Don who controlled the city's ports. They were looking at his son Roman, the man they called the Broken Prince, and the nobody waitress who had just dared to touch him. The guard stepped forward, hands hovering over their holsters. The room held its breath, expecting an execution. Instead, the waitress simply smiled, extended her hand, and whispered 3 words that would bring the Vance Empire to its knees. The chandeliers of the Plaza Hotel didn't just sparkle, they judged. Tessa Reynolds adjusted the collar of her stiff black uniform and tightened her grip on the silver tray of hors d'oeuvres. She was invisible. That was the first rule of working a Vance family gala. Be present, be efficient, but never ever be seen. To the billionaires, politicians and mobsters filling the hall, the service staff were nothing more than moving furniture. Tonight was the celebratory gala for the Vance shipping merger. It was a polite way of saying Silas Vance had just crushed his last competitor and was now the undisputed king of the eastern seaboard. The air smelled of expensive perfume, old money, and underlying violence. Tessa moved through the crowd with practiced grace, dodging elbows and animated gestures. She needed this paycheck. The medical bills for her father's dialysis were stacking up on the kitchen counter like a paper skyscraper, and the tips from tonight, if she didn't get fired, would cover at least 2 weeks of treatment. "Champagne," she offered softly to a group of men discussing union bribes. They took the glasses without looking at her, continuing their conversation. Tessa retreated to the edge of the room, her feet aching in her cheap shoes. From her vantage point near the heavy velvet curtains, she scanned the room. That was when she saw him. Roman Vance. He was sitting alone at a table set for 10, but the other 9 chairs were empty. He was a striking man, perhaps 25 years old, with sharp cheekbones and hair the color of midnight, much like his father. But where Silas Vance projected an aura of predatory confidence, Roman was an island of chaotic stillness. He was rocking slightly in his chair, a rhythmic, subtle forward and back motion. His fingers were tapping against the white tablecloth. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap, pause. His gaze was fixed intently on the crystal centerpiece, analyzing the refraction of light as if it held the secrets of the universe. Tessa knew about him. Everyone knew about him. The tabloids called him the recluse. The darker whispers in the underworld called him the liability. Roman was autistic, and in the brutal hypermasculine world of the Mafia, anything other than ruthless aggression was seen as a fatal weakness. "Look at him," a voice sneered nearby. Tessa stiffened but didn't turn her head. 2 women in backless designer gowns were standing just a few feet away, sipping martinis. One of them was Vanessa Thorne, the daughter of a rival associate. She was beautiful, cruel, and currently bored. "It's embarrassing," Vanessa continued, her voice pitched just loud enough to carry. "Silas conquers the city, and his only heir is broken. Look at him counting the silverware. He belongs in an institution, not a gala. I heard he can't even tie his own shoes." Her companion giggled, swirling her olive. "Do you think he even knows where he is?" Tessa felt a hot flush of anger rise up her neck. She looked back at Roman. He wasn't oblivious, she could tell. His shoulders had tensed. The tapping of his fingers had increased in speed. He heard them. He heard everything. The sensory overload of the gala, the clinking glasses, the roaring laughter, the harsh violin music must have been agonizing for him, and the mockery was just another layer of noise he couldn't filter out. Silas Vance was on the other side of the room, surrounded by senators and judges, accepting their praise. He didn't see his son shrinking into himself, or perhaps Tessa thought bitterly he chose not to look. "Let's go have some fun," Vanessa said, a wicked glint in her eye. Tessa watched in horror as Vanessa and her friend sauntered toward the lonely table. They didn't sit down. They stood over him, looming like vultures. "Roman," Vanessa cooed, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Are you having fun? Are you counting the forks? How many are there? Roman, can you count to 10 for us?" Roman didn't look up. He stared harder at the crystal, his rocking becoming more pronounced. Tap, tap, tap. "Oh, come on!" Vanessa laughed, reaching out and deliberately knocking a fork off the table. It clattered loudly onto the marble floor. Roman flinched violently, covering his ears with his hands. "Oops," Vanessa smirked. "Clumsy me. Are you going to pick that up, or do you need Daddy to do it for you?" The people at the nearby tables stopped talking. They watched. No one stepped in. No one defended him. They were all terrified of Silas, but they enjoyed seeing the weak link humiliated. It made them feel superior. Tessa looked around. The guards were stationed by the doors too far away to notice the subtle bullying. The guests were smirking. Roman was shaking now, his eyes squeezed shut, clearly on the verge of a meltdown. The manager's voice echoed in Tessa's head. Invisible. Be invisible. If she intervened, she would be fired. She would lose the money for her dad. She might even put a target on her back, but then she saw a tear slip out from under Roman's squeezed-shut eyelids. Tessa set her tray down on a side table with a decisive clink. To hell with being invisible. Tessa walked across the dance floor. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird, but her steps were steady. She didn't rush. She moved with the same purposeful efficiency she used when navigating a crowded kitchen. As she approached the table, Vanessa was reaching out to poke Roman's shoulder, treating him like a zoo animal. "Excuse me," Tessa said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was clear, cutting through the localized murmur of mockery. Vanessa turned, looking at Tessa with disdain. She scanned the black uniform, the apron, the lack of jewelry. "We didn't order drinks. Go away." Tessa ignored her. She stepped between Vanessa and Roman, effectively using her body as a shield. She turned her back on the socialite and looked down at the man in the chair. "Roman," she said softly. He didn't respond. He was still covering his ears, rocking. Tessa knelt down. It was a breach of protocol so severe it was almost laughable. Staff never sat or knelt. They stood. But she needed to be on his level. She needed to break the wall of panic he was building. "Roman," she said again, keeping her voice low and devoid of pity. She spoke to him matter-of-factly. "The acoustic resonance of this room is terrible, isn't it? Too much treble, not enough bass." Roman's hands paused over his ears. He didn't look at her, but the rocking slowed. "The frequency of the crystal glasses." Tessa continued improvising based on what she had seen him staring at. "When they toast, it creates a high-pitch vibration. It hurts." Slowly, Roman lowered his hands. He turned his head. His eyes were a startling shade of grey, intelligent and terrified. He looked at her, really looked at her, scanning her face for the mockery he was used to. He found none. "It's chaotic," he whispered. His voice was deep, rich, but unused. "It is," Tessa agreed, "but there is a pattern. Listen to the music, not the noise. The music." The orchestra had shifted into a waltz. The Blue Danube. 3/4 time, Roman murmured. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. "Exactly," Tessa smiled. It was a genuine smile reaching her eyes. She stood up and extended her hand. "Do you know the waltz is just math in motion? It's geometry. If you focus on the count, the chaos disappears. Would you help me check the math? Behind her, Vanessa scoffed loud enough for the table to hear. Oh my God, the help is asking the retard to dance. This is priceless. Tessa didn't flinch. She kept her hand extended, her palm open and steady. May I have this dance? Roman. For a long, agonizing moment, nothing happened. The room seemed to tilt. Tessa could feel the eyes of the guests boring into her back. She sensed the security guards moving in the periphery, likely coming to drag her out for harassing the Don's son. Then Roman moved. He stood up. He was taller than she expected, towering over her by at least 6 inches. He adjusted his cuff, took a deep breath, and placed his hand in hers. His palm was warm, his grip tentative, but firm. 1, 2, 3, he whispered. Tessa led him to the floor. The moment they stepped onto the polished marble, the murmurs turned into a roar of whispers, then suddenly died down as the crowd realized what was happening. Tessa placed her hand on his shoulder. He placed his on her waist. He was stiff. His muscles coiled tight. Just the numbers, she whispered, looking up into his grey eyes. Ignore them. They are just static. We are the signal. We are the signal, he repeated. They began to move. Roman wasn't clumsy. He was precise, incredibly mathematically precise. He moved exactly on the beat, his strides measuring the distance of the floor perfectly. Once he realized that Tessa knew the steps, that she was a reliable variable in his equation, he relaxed. They swept across the floor. Tessa's black uniform stood out starkly against the sea of colorful gowns and tuxedos, but she moved with a dignity that outshone them all. Roman usually hunched, and hiding was standing tall, his face a mask of intense concentration that was slowly softening into something like peace. They turned, and for the first time, Tessa saw the room from the center. She saw the shock on Vanessa's face. She saw the confused waiters. And then the crowd parted. Silas Vance was standing at the edge of the dance floor. The music faltered for a split second as the conductor noticed the Don, but Silas raised a hand, commanding them to continue. Silas's face was unreadable. He was a man who had ordered hits on senators without blinking. He watched his son, the son he had hidden away. The son he didn't know how to love, dancing perfectly with a girl who made less in a year than Silas spent on a suit. Tessa saw Silas, and fear ice-watered through her veins. She had overstepped. She had touched the untouchable, but she couldn't stop now. To stop would be to break the pattern, and she wouldn't do that to Roman. "Turn," she whispered. Roman spun her. It was flawless. For a minute they weren't a waitress and a Mafia prince. They were just 2 people finding order in a chaotic world. The song ended. Roman stopped exactly on the final note. He was breathing heavily, his cheeks flushed, his eyes bright. He looked at Tessa as if she were a magical creature. "The math works," he said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "Yes," Tessa breathed, letting go of his hand. "It does." The silence returned, the heavy, oppressive silence. "You!" A deep, gravelly voice boomed. Tessa froze. Silas Vance was walking towards them. The crowd split like the Red Sea. He moved with the weight of a tank. He stopped 3 feet from Tessa. Up close, he was terrifying. The scars of his past were etched into the lines of his face. He looked at Roman. Then he looked at Tessa. He stared at her name tag. "Tessa," Silas said. It sounded like a sentence. "Yes, sir," she managed to whisper, keeping her chin up. She prepared herself to be fired, to be escorted out, maybe even taken to the back alley. "My office," Silas said. "Now." He turned and walked away. Vanessa let out a cruel, high-pitched laugh. "Well, it was a nice show, honey. Enjoy the unemployment line." Tessa looked at Roman one last time. "I have to go." No, Roman said, stepping forward, his distress returning. Variable missing. I'll be okay. She lied. 2 large guards in dark suits stepped up to her. This way, miss. They escorted her off the floor, past the sneering guests, past a confused manager, and toward the heavy oak doors that led to the private wing of the hotel. As the doors closed behind her, shutting out the music, Tessa knew her life had just changed. She just didn't know if it was about to end. The office of Silas Vance was not a room. It was a testament to absolute power. The walls were lined with first-edition books that had likely never been read, and the floor was covered in a Persian rug that cost more than the house Tessa grew up in. The air was thick, heavy, with the scent of aged scotch, and the metallic tang of fear, mostly hers. Tessa stood in the center of the room, her hands clasped tightly behind her back to hide their trembling. The heavy oak doors had clicked shut behind her, sealing her in with the most dangerous man in New York. Silas didn't sit behind his desk. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the city skyline. The rain had started to fall, streaking the glass like tears. "Do you know how much I pay for security, Miss Reynolds?" Silas asked, his voice low, vibrating through the quiet room. He didn't turn around. Tessa swallowed hard. "No, sir." $4 million a year, Silas said, turning slowly. He held a crystal tumbler of amber liquid. "I pay $4 million for ex-Mossad agents, Navy SEALs, and private contractors to watch my son, to keep him safe, to keep him contained." He took a sip, his dark eyes boring into hers. And yet, he continued walking closer, his footsteps silent on the rug. In 5 minutes, a waitress with a high school diploma and 0 combat training managed to do what an army of experts couldn't. You stopped him from screaming. Tessa's breath hitched. "He was overwhelmed, sir. The sensory input. I know what he is." Silas roared the glass in his hand, shaking slightly. The sudden burst of violence made Tessa flinch, but she held her ground. Silas composed himself instantly, the mask of the Don sliding back into place. "I know he is autistic. I know he is different. I have spent 25 years trying to fix him, trying to toughen him up, trying to make him a Vance." "He doesn't need fixing," Tessa said. The words left her mouth before she could stop them. It was a suicide sentence. "You didn't correct Silas Vance." Silas stopped 3 feet from her. The silence stretched thin and brittle. "Excuse me. He doesn't need fixing," Tessa repeated, her voice shaking but determined. "He needs translation. The world is too loud for him. He's not broken, Mr. Vance. He's just operating on a frequency you aren't listening to." Silas stared at her. For a moment, Tessa thought he was going to strike her. His jaw clenched, the muscles working beneath the skin. Then, incredibly, he let out a short, dry laugh. He walked to his desk and picked up a file folder. He tossed it onto the mahogany surface. It slid across and stopped right in front of her. "Tessa Reynolds," Silas read from memory. Age 24. Mother deceased. Father Thomas Reynolds, suffering from stage 4 chronic kidney disease. Dialysis 3 times a week. You're currently 3 months behind on rent, and the hospital is threatening to send your father's debt to collections. Tessa felt the blood drain from her face. "How?" "I'm the King of New York. Tessa, I know everything," Silas said coldly. "You're drowning. You're working double shifts here and picking up cleaning jobs on the weekends, and it's not enough. Your father is going to die because you can't afford the better treatment, and you're going to end up on the street." Tears stung Tessa's eyes. It was cruel, brutal, and entirely true. "Is this why you brought me here, to mock me?" "No," Silas said. "I brought you here to buy you." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a checkbook. He scribbled something rapidly, tore off the slip, and held it out. $50,000, Silas said. A month. Tessa's eyes widened. What? That's the starting salary. Silas said, his voice all business now. Plus full medical coverage for your father. Top-tier specialists, a private nurse, whatever he needs. I don't understand, Tessa stammered. What do I have to do? I won't do anything illegal. I won't hurt anyone. I don't need a hitter. I have plenty of those. Silas sneered. I need a translator. You used that word. Translation. Roman trusts you. I saw it in his eyes. He let you touch him. He hasn't let anyone touch him since his mother died. Silas walked around the desk, leaning against it. I am expanding my territory. The war with the Irish mob is coming. I need to be focused on the streets. I cannot be distracted by Roman's episodes, and I cannot trust him with the wolves like Vanessa Thorne, who want to marry him for his name and then lock him in a basement. He held the check closer to her. Your job is simple. You will live at the Vance estate. You will be his personal assistant, his companion, his shadow. You will ensure he eats. You will ensure he is presentable. And when the noise gets too loud, you will do that waltz thing or whatever magic you pulled tonight to bring him back. Tessa looked at the check. It was more money than she had ever seen. It was her father's life. It was salvation. But looking at Silas, she knew it was also a deal with the devil. There are rules, Silas added, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. Rule 1, you are staff. Do not think you are family. Rule 2, you keep him calm. If he has a meltdown in public that embarrasses the family, you are out. And Rule 3, he stepped closer, invading her personal space, his cologne suffocating her. If you hurt him, if you betray him, if you try to use him to get to me, I won't just fire you, Tessa. I will erase you. Do we understand each other? Tessa looked at the check, then up at the man who terrified an entire city. She thought of her father sitting in that dialysis chair, his skin grey, shivering under a thin blanket. She took the check. We understand each other, Tessa whispered. Good, Silas said, turning back to the window. Pack your bags. The car arrives at 8:00 a.m. Don't be late. The Vance estate was not a home. It was a fortress disguised as a mansion. Located in the rolling hills of upstate New York, it was surrounded by 12-foot iron fences, cameras that swiveled like robotic eyes, and men with earpieces patrolling the perimeter with Dobermans. Tessa stepped out of the black SUV, clutching her battered suitcase. It looked pitiful against the backdrop of the sprawling limestone manor. Ms. Reynolds? A stiff butler intoned at the door. Mr. Vance is currently in the city. Master Roman is in the West Wing. You are to report to him immediately. Tessa nodded, her stomach doing somersaults. She had sold her soul, and now she had to perform. She was led through halls filled with Renaissance art and cold marble statues. The house was silent, oppressively so. It felt less like a place where people lived, and more like a museum where ghosts were trapped. He's in the library, the butler said, gesturing to a set of double doors before retreating. Tessa took a deep breath, smoothed her new blouse, purchased in a panic that morning, and knocked. Enter, a voice said. It wasn't the hesitant whisper from the ballroom. It was distracted, sharp. Tessa pushed the doors open. The library was 2 stories high, filled with thousands of books. But Roman wasn't reading. He was standing in front of a massive glass whiteboard that had been wheeled into the center of the room. The board was covered in equations, shipping schedules, weather patterns, and fuel consumption rates. Roman was wearing a loose t-shirt and sweatpants, barefoot. He held a red marker in one hand and a blue one in the other. He was writing furiously, both hands, moving at the same time, creating a web of data that looked like chaos to the untrained eye. "You're late," Roman said, not looking around. The car arrived at the gate at 9:02. The schedule said 9:00. 2 minutes creates a cascading delay in the day's structure. Tessa stepped inside, closing the door softly. There was traffic on the bridge, a variable we couldn't control. Roman's hands stopped. He turned slowly. When he saw her, the frantic energy in his eyes seemed to settle just a fraction. "The waltz girl," he said. "Tessa," she corrected gently. "My name is Tessa." "Tessa," he tested the word, tasting the syllables. "Tessa means harvester, Greek origin." He pointed the red marker at her. "Are you here to harvest? I'm here to help you with the noise," Tessa said, walking further into the room. She looked at the whiteboard. "What is all this?" "Father's logistics," Roman muttered, turning back to the board. "The shipping lanes for the Atlantic fleet. He's trying to route the cargo through Port Newark next Tuesday." "It's wrong." Tessa frowned. She stepped closer. She saw names of ships' tonnage and dates. "Why is it wrong?" "The barometric pressure," Roman said, tapping a section of blue numbers. "A storm system is developing off the coast of Cape Verde. It won't hit the news for 2 days, but the pressure drops are already in the data. If the ships take the Newark route, they will hit the storm wall. Delay of 48 hours. Loss of perishable goods. The Irish Combine will use the delay to move their product first." Tessa stared at him. The broken prince, the man everyone called a liability, was casually predicting the weather and global logistics better than a computer. "Does your father know this?" Tessa asked. "He doesn't listen," Roman said, his voice tight with frustration. He started rocking on his heels. "He listens to Luca. Luca says the route is clear. Luca is loud. Luca smells like cigar smoke and lies." Tessa realized then that Silas didn't know what he had. He thought he was warehousing a defective son, but he was actually ignoring his greatest strategic asset. "Tell me about the lies," Tessa said softly, moving to his side. She didn't touch him, just stood close enough to be a presence. Roman pointed to a column of numbers on the far right. "These are the fuel costs for the Red Star container ship. Luca manages the accounts. The numbers, they don't rhyme. They don't rhyme. The consumption rate is 15% higher than the distance requires," Roman said, his speech speeding up. "Mathematically impossible for that engine type, unless the fuel isn't being bought, or the money is going somewhere else." "Luca is stealing from your father," Tessa whispered. Roman shrugged, capping the markers. "The numbers are broken. It makes my head hurt." Before Tessa could respond, the library doors banged open. Roman flinched violently, dropping the markers. He scrambled backward, putting the whiteboard between himself and the intruder. It was Luca, the man Roman had just mentioned. He was a bear of a man, Silas's capo, with a thick neck and a face that looked like it had been chiseled out of granite. He was followed by Vanessa Thorne. "There he is!" Luca boomed, his voice grating and loud. "Playing with his coloring books." Vanessa laughed, stepping into the room. She was wearing a white tennis outfit, looking pristine and predatory. "Hello, Roman. Did you miss me?" Roman covered his ears, squeezing his eyes shut. "Too loud. Too loud. We need the room, freak," Luca said, walking toward the desk. "I got a meeting with the union reps. Get out." Tessa felt that familiar heat rising in her chest. This was the lion's den. These were the people Silas warned her about. But she wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was the $50,000 handler. "He isn't going anywhere," Tessa said. Her voice was steady, surprising even herself. Luca stopped and looked at her. He squinted, recognizing her. Oh, right. The babysitter. Silas told me he hired a stray. Look, sweetheart, go get me a coffee and take the retard for a walk. Vanessa smirked, leaning against a bookshelf. You heard him. Run along, help. Tessa didn't move. She could feel Roman vibrating with panic behind her. If she backed down now, she would lose his trust forever. And if Luca saw the board, if he saw that Roman knew about the embezzlement, Roman would be in danger. Real danger. Tessa stepped in front of the whiteboard, blocking Luca's view of the fuel calculations. This is Roman's private study, Tessa said, channeling the coldest tone she could muster, mimicking Silas. Mr. Vance gave strict orders that Roman's routine is not to be disturbed. Unless you want me to call Silas right now and explain why you interrupted his son's work, Luca hesitated. The name Silas was a magical shield. Even a capo didn't want to annoy the Don over something trivial. I have business, Luca growled. Then take it to the conference room, Tessa countered. This room is occupied. Luca stepped closer, looming over her. He smelled of stale tobacco and aggression. You got a big mouth for a girl who serves appetizers. Watch your step or you might trip. I have excellent balance, Tessa said, holding his gaze. Luca scoffed, spat on the carpet, a deliberate insult, and turned around. Let's go, Vanessa. Smell of crazy in here is too strong. Vanessa lingered for a second, her eyes narrowing at Tessa. You think you're special because you danced with him. You're just a pet darling. And pets get put down when they bite. She turned on her heel and followed Luca out. As the door clicked shut, the tension in the room snapped. Roman slid down to the floor, his back against the whiteboard, breathing in ragged gasps. Tessa knelt beside him. She didn't hush him. She didn't tell him it was okay. They're gone, she said simply. The variable has been removed. Roman looked at her. His grey eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of fear and awe. He looked at her, not as a servant, but as a shield. You blocked the data, Roman whispered. You stood in front of the fuel numbers. I did. Why? Because Luca is a predator, Tessa said, lowering her voice. And you found his trail. We can't let him know you know Roman. Not yet. Roman stared at her for a long time. Then slowly he reached out and touched a loose strand of hair that had fallen near her face. He tucked it behind her ear. His fingers were shaking, but his touch was gentle. You saw the pattern, he said. You saw the danger. I see you, Roman, Tessa replied. I see you. For the first time in his life, Roman Vance didn't feel like a broken equation. He felt like part of a solution. But Tessa knew, as she looked at the damning numbers on the whiteboard, that they had just started a war. Luca was stealing millions, and now the only two people who knew were an autistic genius and a waitress who was in way over her head. 3 days later, the storm that Roman had predicted hit the Atlantic, but the storm inside the Vance empire was brewing even faster. Silas Vance decided it was time for a field test. He wanted to see if his $50,000 investment in Tessa was actually yielding results, or if she was just a gloriously expensive babysitter. The order came down at breakfast. Tessa and Roman were to accompany Luca to Port Newark for a routine inspection of the incoming Red Star shipment. Tessa felt a knot of dread tighten in her stomach. Sending them to the docks with Luca, the very man Roman had identified as a thief, felt like sending sheep into a wolf's den. But refusing Silas was not an option. The ride to the port was suffocating. They took a reinforced black Cadillac Escalade. Luca sat in the front passenger seat, chewing on a toothpick, while Tessa and Roman sat in the back. A glass partition separated them, but Tessa could feel Luca's eyes in the rearview mirror, cold and calculating. Roman was agitated. The change in routine, the looming grey sky, and the proximity to Luca were triggering his stims. He tapped his knee rapidly. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It's okay, Tessa whispered, placing her hand, palm up, on the seat between them. She didn't grab his hand, she offered hers. Focus on the rhythm, the tires on the asphalt. It's a constant hum. Roman looked at her hand, then at the grey landscape rushing by. Vector velocity is 62 miles per hour, he muttered. Friction coefficient is increasing due to rain. Exactly, Tessa said. Just physics. Predictable. When they arrived at Port Newark, the world turned into an industrial nightmare of noise. Cranes screeched like dying metal beasts. Semi-trucks blasted their air horns, and the wind whipped off the grey water, carrying the smell of diesel and rotting fish. Roman recoiled as he stepped out of the car, covering his ears. Look at him, Luca laughed, stepping out and buttoning his trench coat. Scared of a little noise? Hey, Prince, try not to wet yourself, okay? The men are watching. A group of dock workers, burly men with grease-stained faces, paused their work to stare. They smirked, nudging each other. They saw the retard Prince and his nanny. Tessa stepped close to Roman, shielding him from the wind and the stares. Look at the containers. Roman. She directed him, pointing to the massive stacks of red, blue, and orange steel boxes, towering like skyscrapers. Look at the geometry. It's a grid. Find the pattern. Roman blinked, his breathing hitching. He focused on the stacks. Matrix, he whispered. Rows of 12. Stacks of 6. Color sequences random, no, not random. Logistical sorting based on destination. He calmed down, his brain latching onto the order within the chaos. Luca led them toward Pier 4, where the Red Star vessel was docking. Silas wants a count on the medical crates, Luca shouted over the wind. You two stay here. I'm going to go talk to the foreman. Don't wander off, or you might get crushed. Luca disappeared behind a wall of containers. The security detail Silas had sent stayed by the car 50 yards back, leaving Tessa and Roman alone in the shadow of a massive gantry crane. Roman was scanning the containers being unloaded. Suddenly he stopped rocking. He went perfectly still. Wrong, he said. What's wrong? Tessa asked, looking around nervously. The port felt abandoned in this section, too quiet despite the distant noise. The tension on the cables, Roman said, pointing up at the crane overhead. It was hoisting a massive 40-foot container labeled medical supplies. Hooke's law, the extension of the steel cable is insufficient for the declared load. Tessa frowned. What does that mean? The manifest says that container holds MRI machines. Weight 25,000 pounds. Roman recited rapidly, his eyes tracking the sway of the box. But the cable tension suggests a load of less than 2,000 pounds. The displacement is wrong. The sway period is too short. He looked at Tessa, his eyes wide. It's empty. The container is empty. Tessa's heart stopped. If the containers were empty, Luca wasn't just skimming fuel costs. He was faking entire shipments. He was stealing millions in inventory, selling the real goods elsewhere, and shipping air to Silas. We have to go, Tessa said, grabbing Roman's sleeve. We have to tell your father. No, Roman said, tilting his head. Listen. Roman, we don't have time for... The gears. Roman interrupted. The crane gears. The rhythm is broken. It skipped a beat. A deliberate bypass of the safety brake. Tessa looked up. The massive container suspended directly above them groaned. The cable shuddered. In that split second, Tessa understood. This wasn't an inspection. It was an execution, an industrial accident to wipe out the liability and the witness. Move! Tessa screamed. She lunged at Roman, shoving him hard, but Roman didn't stumble. His mind, processing the physics of the falling object faster than she could comprehend, realized that running away was impossible, The container was too wide. Instead of running, Roman grabbed Tessa's waist. "Trajectory arc," he yelled. "Impact zone is 3 meters left." He didn't push her away. He pulled her in. He threw them both into a small triangular gap between 2 stacked concrete barriers, just as the cable snapped. Boom! The sound was earth-shattering. The 40-foot steel container crashed onto the concrete exactly where they had been standing a second ago. The ground shook violently, throwing up a cloud of dust and metal shards. The container crumpled on impact, twisting into jagged metal. If they had run, the debris would have sliced them in half. By diving into the small pocket, Roman had calculated they were shielded by the concrete barriers. Silence followed the crash. Tessa was coughing, covered in dust, her heart hammering so hard it hurt. She was pressed against the cold concrete, with Roman's heavy body shielding her. He was shaking, but he wasn't screaming. "Roman!" she gasped. "Are you hurt?" He pulled back. His cheek was bleeding from a flying stone, but his eyes were clear. The math held. He whispered. "The angle of deflection protected us." "You saved my life," Tessa breathed. "You pushed me first," he corrected. "Oh my God. An accident." Luca's voice rang out, fake panic, dripping from every syllable. "Help, the cable snapped." "Get a medic." Tessa grabbed Roman's face, forcing him to look at her. "Listen to me closely, Roman. This wasn't an accident. Luca tried to kill us." Roman's expression hardened. The boyish fear evaporated, replaced by the cold, hard look of a Vance. "I know. The probability of mechanical failure on a simplified pulley system inspected yesterday is 0.04%. Sabotage." "We can't let him know we survived yet," Tessa hissed. "Stay down." But it was too late. Luca came rounding the corner of the crushed container, a gun drawn likely to put them out of their misery if the crash hadn't finished the job. When he saw them huddled in the gap alive and staring back at him, Luca's face went pale, then red with rage. He raised the gun. "You possess 9 lives. Freak!" Luca growled. "Let's see if you can calculate a bullet." "Luca!" The shout came from behind him. It was the head of Silas's security detail, running up with his weapon, drawn, alerted by the crash. "Put the weapon away." "What happened?" Luca quickly holstered his gun, switching masks instantly. "I was checking for threats. The cable snapped. I thought we were under attack." He looked down at Roman and Tessa, his eyes promising death later. "You two are lucky. Real lucky." Tessa helped Roman stand up. She brushed the dust off his jacket. She saw the blood on his cheek, and for the first time since she arrived at the Vance estate, she wasn't afraid. She was furious. She looked at Luca. "The container broke open. Luca," she said, pointing to the twisted metal. Inside the mangled steel, there were no MRI machines. There were only bags of sand, split open, spilling onto the dock. "Sand," Tessa said loud enough for the security team to hear. "We almost died for bags of sand." Luca's jaw clenched. "Customs decoys," he lied smoothly. "Standard procedure." "We're going home," Roman said suddenly. His voice was deep authoritative. It startled everyone, including Luca. "Now." As they walked back to the car, Roman didn't cover his ears. He walked in step with Tessa. The rhythm had changed. It was no longer a waltz. It was a war march. The grand hall of the Vance estate was designed for intimidation. A long mahogany table dominated the room, seated under an oil painting of Silas's father. Tonight the room was full. Silas sat at the head. On his right were his capos, his advisors, and his lawyers. On his left sat Luca, looking battered but defiant. Tessa and Roman stood at the foot of the table. The atmosphere was toxic. Luca had spun a narrative before they even got back. He claimed that Roman had wandered into a restricted zone, distracting the crane operator, causing the accident. He claimed Tessa had been negligent, flirting with the guards instead of watching her charge. "She's a liability, Silas," Luca said, slamming his hand on the table. "She almost got your son killed today. I tried to save them, but the boy panicked. He's getting worse. He's unstable." Silas looked tired. He swirled his scotch, staring at Tessa. "Is this true, Miss Reynolds? Did Roman wander off?" "No, sir," Tessa said, her voice ringing clear. "We were exactly where Luca told us to stand." "Liar!" Luca shouted. "You're trying to cover your ass because you want the paycheck. You're a waitress, honey. You don't know how this world works." Silas looked at Roman. "Roman, what happened?" Roman stood still. He was looking at the chandelier, counting the crystals again. To the room he looked disengaged, broken. "He can't answer you, Silas." Luca sneered. "Look at him." The explosion scrambled his brains. "He's been muttering numbers for 3 hours. He belongs in a facility." Vanessa, who was sitting near the back, chimed in. "It's really for the best, Silas. He's suffering here." Tessa felt Roman's hand brush against hers. A small signal. Tap, tap. "He's not muttering," Tessa said. "He's calculating." "Calculating what?" Silas asked sharply. "How many toothpicks are on the table?" "No." Roman spoke. The room went silent. Roman stepped forward. He walked toward his father, ignoring Luca completely. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper, the bill of lading he had swiped from the dock office before they left. "Logistics," Roman said. He placed the paper on the table. "The Red Star shipment. Manifest claims 40 tons of medical equipment. Fuel consumption for the ship indicates a payload of only 15 tons. Silas frowned, picking up the paper. "What are you saying? Physics?" Roman continued, his voice gaining strength. "The crane cable tension, the sway velocity, the container that fell on us was empty, filled with sand." "He's crazy." Luca stood up, his face purple. "He's hallucinating. The trauma." "Sit down, Luca," Silas barked. He looked at his son. "Go on, Roman." Roman turned to the massive smart screen on the wall used for strategy meetings. He picked up the remote. "I have been tracking the numbers for 6 months, Roman said. "The fuel accounts, the warehouse leases, the payroll for the dock workers." He pressed a button. The screen lit up. It wasn't a child's drawing. It was a complex professional spreadsheet, color-coded and linked to bank routing numbers. Variable X. Roman pointed to a recurring column. Shell companies in the Caymans, all linked to an IP address. He looked at Luca. "Yours." The room erupted in whispers. The capos leaned in, looking at the data. It was undeniable. The math was perfect. It showed siphoning of funds nearly $12 million over 2 years. "He hacked my computer," Luca screamed, desperate now. "This is a setup. The retard doesn't even know how to tie his shoes." "He didn't hack you." Tessa stepped in, her voice filled with pride. "He just paid attention. You ignored him, Luca. You all ignored him. You thought because he doesn't speak much, he doesn't see. But he sees everything. He sees the patterns you try to hide." Silas was studying the screen. He saw the dates, he saw the amounts, and he saw the undeniable truth that his broken son had just outsmarted his top lieutenant. Silas stood up. He walked over to Luca. "You called him a retard," Silas said softly. "Silas, listen, it's a trick." "You stole from me," Silas continued, his voice rising. "But worse, you tried to kill my son." "It was an accident. Roman calculated the fall," Silas said, looking at the boy with a strange new expression. "Respect. He calculated the deflection. If he says the container was empty, it was empty. If he says you did it, you did it." Silas gestured to his guards. "Take him." "No! You can't do this! I made you!" Luca screamed as 2 massive guards dragged him out of the room. His screams echoed down the hallway until the heavy door slammed shut. The silence that followed was different from the silence at the gala. It wasn't awkward. It was heavy with awe. Silas turned to Roman. For the first time, he didn't look at him with pity or disappointment. He looked at him as an equal. "You did this?" Silas asked, gesturing to the screen. The numbers were loud. Roman shrugged, retreating back to Tessa's side. "I just put them in order." Silas looked at Tessa. "And you understood this?" "I just translated, sir," Tessa said. "He has the answers. He always has. You just weren't asking the right questions." Silas let out a long breath. He looked at his son, really looked at him. "I need a new capo for the shipping division," Silas said. "Someone who understands the logistics. Someone who can't be lied to." He paused. "Roman, the job is yours." Roman stiffened. He looked at Tessa, panic flaring in his eyes. "Too loud. Too many people. Handshakes. Eye contact. No." "He can't run a crew, Silas," Tessa interjected firmly. "He can't be a don in the traditional sense. It will destroy him." Silas frowned. "Then what good is this genius if he hides in the library?" "He doesn't need to hide," Tessa said, stepping closer to Roman, their shoulders touching. "He can be the architect. He stays in the shadows. He runs the numbers, the strategy, the logistics. I will be the face. I will be the voice. I will deliver his orders." Silas raised an eyebrow. "You a waitress." "A partner." Roman corrected. He took Tessa's hand, interlacing their fingers in front of everyone. "She is the constant, the necessary variable." Silas looked at their joined hands. He looked at the fire in Tessa's eyes and the calm intelligence in Roman's. He realized that together they were more dangerous than any army he could buy. "Very well," Silas nodded slowly. "The architect and his voice." He raised his glass. "To the new era." 6 months later, the Vance family had changed. The chaotic violence of the past was gone, replaced by a terrifying cold efficiency known as the Silent Empire. In the renovated West Wing, Roman stood before a wall of monitors in a soundproofed command center. Tessa sat beside him, wearing a tailored navy suit and a discreet earpiece. They were a perfect machine. Roman was the architect analyzing data and predicting outcomes, while Tessa was the voice executing his strategies with ruthless diplomacy. "The Greek syndicate is stalling," Tessa said, covering her microphone. "They want a fee hike." Roman didn't look up from his screens. "Negative. They are over-leveraged in copper futures. They're desperate for liquidity. Deny the hike." Tessa relayed the message calmly. Seconds later, she smiled. They folded. "We have the shipment." Roman finally turned, looking healthy and calm in soft cashmere. "Predictable. The variables are stable. Silas wants us at the Winter Gala tonight," Tessa said gently. "At the plaza." Roman froze. The plaza was the site of his humiliation, a place of uncontrolled noise. "Too loud," he murmured, hands twitching. "We aren't going as guests, Roman. We are going as the hosts," Tessa assured him. She handed him a velvet box containing custom-molded earpieces. "Active noise cancellation. You will hear nothing but my voice. We are the signal. Everything else is static." Roman looked at her with absolute trust. "You are the signal. Okay, we go." The atmosphere at the Plaza Hotel was transformed. When the limousine arrived, the paparazzi lowered their cameras in deferential fear. Silas stepped out first, followed by Roman and Tessa. Roman wore a velvet tuxedo, his expression unreadable behind the faint blue glow of his earpieces. They moved through the ballroom like sharks. The same elite who had mocked the broken prince 6 months ago now bowed their heads. They knew Roman was the invisible hand, now controlling their debts and supply lines. In the center of the room stood Vanessa Thorne. She looked gaunt, her dress a season old, her arrogance crumbling as they approached. "Well," she shrilled, trying to summon her old cruelty. "If it isn't the nanny and her pet." The room went deathly silent. Roman adjusted his cufflink, turning up his audio feed. "Vanessa Thorne." Roman said, his voice deep and steady. "Heart rate elevated. Pupil dilation indicates high stress." "Excuse me," Vanessa sputtered. "Your father's trucking company filed for bankruptcy this morning." Roman recited cold facts. "You have 3 mortgages on your penthouse. The bank forecloses on Monday. You are not here to celebrate. You are here to hunt for a husband to pay your debts." Vanessa went pale, her martini glass slipping from her fingers and shattering. Crash! Roman didn't flinch. "Entropy," he noted. "Things fall apart when the foundation is weak." Tessa stepped forward, her eyes lethal. "You asked him to count the forks once, Vanessa. Remember?" Vanessa trembled, unable to speak. "You don't need to count them tonight," Tessa whispered. "Because Roman bought your debt. He owns your apartment. He owns the chair you're standing next to. Run along, Vanessa, before we evict you." Humiliated and broken, Vanessa fled the ballroom, the crowd parting to let her escape. The karmic circle was complete. "Music," Roman commanded. The orchestra immediately swelled into a waltz. Roman turned to Tessa, extending his hand just as he had that first night. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. She smiled, taking it. They moved in perfect synchronization, not a rescue mission this time, but a victory lap. Roman guided her fluidly, his eyes locked on hers, ignoring the math of the floor to focus on the woman in his arms. "I calculated the probability," Roman whispered as they spun near the balcony doors. "Probability of what?" "Of survival," Roman said intensely. "Without you, it is 0. You are not just a translator, Tessa. You are the constant. In every equation, if you are missing, the system fails." He pulled her close, their chests touching. "I have analyzed the data. The conclusion is undeniable. I love you." Tears pricked Tessa's eyes. It was the grandest declaration possible from a man who saw the world in numbers. "I love you too, Roman. More than math." He lowered his head and kissed her. It was precise, gentle, and the only quiet moment in a loud world. From across the room, Silas Vance watched them with a rare smile, raising his glass. The empire was in good hands. On the balcony overlooking the snow-covered city, they now ruled the architect, and his voice stood together, untouchable, unbreakable, and finally perfectly silent. And that is the story of how a waitress and an invisible prince brought an empire to its knees. Not with guns, but with love and mathematics. This story reminds us that what society labels as a weakness is often a hidden superpower waiting for the right person to understand it. Roman was mocked for his autism, treated like he was broken, but he was actually the smartest person in the room. He just needed someone like Tessa to stand by him, to be his shield, and to listen when the rest of the world turned away. It's a powerful lesson in karma. Be careful who you underestimate, because the person you ignore today might be the one holding the keys to your future tomorrow. What did you think of Roman's revenge on Luca and Vanessa? Did they get what they deserved? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching.